If young men lack posh books and learn speech far too broad, those sounds by boys make clear they're poor. YouTube has lots of videos of people demonstrating standard British vowels, but in this video I'm going to show you what these IPA symbols really sound like and why they were chosen. This may be the best known set of vowel symbols in the world, given how many English teachers use a British teaching model. The only accent as widely taught is General American, and there isn't a single transcription system for American English that has anything like the near monopoly enjoyed by these symbols. Very few of the people who use these symbols know the sounds they were actually meant to represent, sounds which are very different from, say, the ones I'm using now. The symbols were proposed, except for a couple of small modifications, by A.C. Gimson in his extremely influential 1962 book, An Introduction to the Pronunciation of English. Gimson was Professor of Phonetics at University College London, and I'm old enough to have been taught by him when I was an undergraduate there. Known to everyone as Gim, he wasn't just a major phonetician, but also a really nice man who was happy to stop and chat about phonetics with a student like me. Of course, the book wasn't an introduction to the pronunciation of English in general. It focused on just one British accent, spoken by a pretty small fraction of the population, at the top of the social pyramid, called received pronunciation, or RP for short. Now, RP had already been in existence for a long time by 1962, and so had the International Phonetic Alphabet, so you might be wondering what set of symbols phoneticians had been using previously if it wasn't this one. Well, Gimson's predecessor at UCL and the founder of the phonetics department was the famous Daniel Jones. Gimson's book was in effect a replacement for Jones's An Outline of English Phonetics, first published in 1918. Jones's symbols for RP vowels were rather different. Now, the differences, with one exception, weren't about any change in pronunciation that had taken place. In fact, pronunciation really hadn't changed all that much. The differences were about simplicity versus accuracy. Phoneme symbols, the kind we use in dictionaries, aren't obliged to be highly accurate. Where there's no possibility of confusion with another sound in the language, it's common to choose a simpler symbol, one that looks more like a familiar letter in the normal writing system. For example, in the IPA, this symbol strictly means a trill, rrr, but you find it used as a phoneme symbol in English, German, Japanese, etc. And it's not a trill in the standard variety of any of those languages. The English sounds more accurately transcribed with this symbol. In fact, you can get even more accurate with extra symbols, but that means a loss of simplicity. Jones tried to describe English vowels with as few symbols as he felt able to, using the 5 vowel letters of the normal alphabet in multiple phonemes. For example, he thought the basic difference between the vowels of ship and sheep was length, and that the difference in vowel quality was a secondary matter that didn't need to be shown in a dictionary transcription. But Gimson wanted his symbols to show clearly how the vowels sounded, not hesitating to use special IPA symbols to show the details of RP pronunciation. As he put it, he wanted his symbols to be explicit on the phonetic level. He also provided for each vowel a vowel quadrilateral diagram to show subtle differences between the RP vowel and the exact IPA value. I'm going to go through the system vowel by vowel, building up an overall picture that you may find surprising, amusing, perhaps even a bit shocking. And I'll build up a demonstration sentence in which each word contains one of the 20 RP vowels. Let's start with the 7 short vowels. For clarity, I'll be referring to them by the keywords that were proposed by Gimson's successor, J.C. Wells. First of all, the 3 front short vowels. As I said, Gimson chose the most accurate IPA symbol for each one. So for the vowel in words like kit, he chose this small capital I, which Jones hadn't used, and which in strict IPA sounds like this.
E.
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 This vowel's not all that different from the kit vowel you hear in modern standard Southern British, But for the RP vowel in dress, Gimson felt the most accurate IPA symbol was a lowercase e, also known as cardinal vowel 2. In strict IPA, it sounds like this.
E.
Which to my ear sounds pretty similar to the kit vowel. Now, Gimson shows us that the RP vowel was actually a bit opener, but nonetheless, the general RP variety of this vowel tends to be closer to cardinal E than to cardinal E. Certainly the RP dress vowel could sound remarkably like modern kit. Listen to a famous teaching record that was made by Daniel Jones and the well-known linguist J.R. Firth, in which they act out a scene in a stationer's shop.
Have you got the fountain pens I asked for the other day?
Yes, they've just come in. Shall I show you some?
Jones's pen there sounds to me very like the way I'd say pin.
Have you got the fountain pens I asked for the other day? Pen.
Now for the RP trap vowel, Gimson used this symbol, the famous AE ligature, which in IPA sounds like this. This vowel probably symbolised old RP more than any other. It was between IPA e and a, and as Gimson's chart shows, closer to the former. Indeed, it was so far from IPA a that even in Jones's simpler set of symbols, he used the AE ligature rather than the simple letter A. One of my dim earliest memories is this BBC children's programme, which was very popular at the time of Gimson's book.
Rag, Tag and Bobtail. His paw was black when it came out. Rag, Tag, black.
The RP trap vowel could sound very like the modern dress vowel. My parents used to tell a joke that sex is what posh people have their coal delivered in. The joke being that RP speakers pronounced sax the way normal people pronounced sex. So one of the things that gave RP its distinctive sound was the compression of kit, dress and trap into a small area of the vowel space, making it especially hard for learners to distinguish them. As Gimson himself put it, this compression of the front phonemes is a characteristic of RP, but regional dialects often show a greater qualitative separation of these phonemes. It's hardly surprising that some RP speakers made their kit vowel closer than it would be today, I rather than I. And even the Queen let her trap vowel lower a bit between the 1950s and the 1980s. Let's start building up that sentence containing each of the vowels we've covered. With the three we've looked at so far, we could say, if men lack. If men lack. For the RP vowel in words like strut, Gimson, like Jones, used this symbol, which in IPA sounds like this. According to Gimson, older speakers had a more back vowel, while younger speakers had shifted it further forward, so it sounded more like the single open vowel of so many languages, ah.
Only once will you hear her real voice. Only one.
Using the somewhat centralised quality, we can add another word to our demo sentence. If young men lack. If young men lack. For the lot vowel, Gimson chose this symbol, which in the IPA sounds like this. And his chart shows the RP vowel as having pretty much exactly that quality, very open and fully back.
They are really good and will stand a lot of use. Lot.
The nib's a bit too soft and too broad. Soft.
Gimson does say about lot that the lip rounding in RP was, quote, very slight. Many RP speakers had practically none, so not lot, but lot.
He was just passing Rag's log.
For the foot vowel, Gimson chose this symbol rather than the simple letter U of Jones's system. In IPA, it sounds like this. Many RP speakers had that IPA quality, a bit less central than the chart, but it's even further forward in modern SSB and General American.
They each took a leaf. Oh, good! Took good.
So adding to our demo sentence a slightly rounded lot vowel and a quite back foot vowel, we can get if young men lack posh books. If young men lack posh books. That leaves only one more short vowel, the inevitable schwa. In final position, RP speakers could make it quite a lot more open, very like the strut vowel.
This decision has been made less difficult to me by the sure knowledge that my brother.
But schwa was mostly a mid-central vowel, as it is today.
They are really good and will stand a lot of use. And
We can say the same about the long vowel of words like nurse, but there's a potential confusion here. You see, Gimson replaced Jones's long schwa symbol with this, but he meant no change in quality. Back then, there was no clear agreement on how, if at all, the number 3 type symbol differed in quality from schwa. Today's IPA chart tells us that the number 3 or backwards epsilon means an opener quality. But that was never on the chart when I was a student. Indeed, Daniel Jones implied that the long nurse vowel was, if anything, more close than schwa. My impression, although I haven't found a quote stating this, is that Gimson, in opposition to Jones, wanted to make all the vowels look as different from each other as possible. Anyway, continuing our demo sentence with the mid-central vowels. If young men lack posh books and learn. If young men lack posh books and learn. Now, continuing with Gimson's long monophthongs, we come to what I consider Gimson's only real mistake. This is his decision to stick with Jones's symbols for the fleece vowel and the goose vowel. In the IPA, these symbols sound like this.
E.
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 Ooh. Ooh.
Now, did the RP vowels of fleece and goose actually sound like that? Well, occasionally. But Gimson tells us quite clearly that these two vowels are usually diphthongs. I made a long video going through lots and lots of evidence for why these two vowels have basically been diphthongs since they were created by the Great Vowel Shift, as many linguists are quite aware. It's true that when they're in syllables that are shortened for some reason, they can get squeezed into monophthongs, but all the evidence groups them with the closing diphthongs, and Gimson should have gone for these symbols, or better still, these, because the second elements are glides, not full vowels. As I mentioned in my long video, some RP speakers did use relatively tense, pure E and OO. Gimson actually calls such pronunciations an affectation, but sadly, these are the symbols he decided to choose.
Rag and Bobtail went off to look for some nice big leaves to use as towels. Use leaves. Use leaves.
If young men lack posh books and learn speech too. If young men lack posh books and learn speech too. This leaves two more long monophthongs, the vowels of palm and thought, where again Gimson follows Jones. So the RP palm vowel is transcribed with this symbol, which in IPA sounds like this. And Gimson shows the RP vowel quite far back and with the tongue body as low as possible.
We have a harder one. Hard.
For the thought vowel, Gimson uses this symbol. To my ear, this is an IPA vowel which phoneticians demonstrate somewhat inconsistently. I think it's meant to be roughly the open O of Italian, a bit like the thought vowel used by many in Canada and the eastern USA. Gimson implies that it used to be more open than it was in 1962, but clearly it was still more open then than contemporary SSB thought.
The single thought of what would, in the end, be best for all. thought, thought, ow, ow.
He saw what the babies were doing. Saw.
If young men lack posh books and learn speech far too broad. If young men lack posh books and learn speech far too broad. And so to Gimson's closing diphthongs, which mostly glide between qualities we've already covered. The goat diphthong is one vowel where Gimson actually does intend to show a change since the time of Jones's description. In the earlier 20th century, it started with a back-rounded quality, O. But by 1962, Gimson felt that the mainstream RP pronunciation began with a central, more schwa-like quality, O. Today's SSB has quite a similar goat vowel, perhaps starting a bit more open, O. The mouth diphthong, on the other hand, has changed a lot since 1962. Gimson felt it began with the same symbol he used for the palm vowel, so a fairly back quality, ow.
They found lots of places to hide. Found. It points down. Down.
In subsequent years, he changed the first symbol to the ordinary letter A, which is more familiar today, but I think this may have been just a typographical simplification rather than an indication of how the vowel moved forward, which it certainly did. Note on the chart how this closing diphthong doesn't end very close at all, not even at the level of the U symbol. Gimson also tells us that the final rounding was weak, and many RP speakers had hardly any rounding at all.
For many years now, I have been extremely proud.
If young men lack posh books and learn speech far too broad, those sounds. If young men lack posh books and learn speech far too broad, those sounds. Now to the set of front closing diphthongs, which should include fleece, but in Gimson's system, of course, doesn't. That leaves price, choice, and face. Gimson begins the price diphthong with this front symbol. In fact, it's the only vowel in his 1962 system that contains this symbol. In IPA, it sounds like this.
Ah.
This is very different from the back onset of the ow diphthong. Again, the end point is not very close, so a glide from a to I.
How much are they?
From 19 and 6 to 2 guineas. They are rather expensive, but they last a lifetime. 9, life.
In modern SSB, the starting points of price and mouth are the reverse, I and ow, as opposed to RP, I and ow. In 1962, the modern diphthongs would have been considered more or less Cockney. For the choice diphthong, Gimson begins with the same open O symbol that he used for the thought vowel. His chart shows that the precise value was definitely quite open, getting towards the lot vowel. As with mouth and price, the diphthong doesn't get very close, so oi.
Only once will you hear her real voice.
If young men lack posh books and learn speech far too broad, those sounds by boys. If young men lack posh books and learn speech far too broad, those sounds by boys. When we look at Gimson's chart for the RP face diphthong, the first thing that jumps out is that it isn't moving in a close front direction at all. It starts just below this vowel, cardinal 2, which, to remind ourselves, sounds like this.
E.
And then the tongue raises and retracts, so from to Quite strange really, but that's kind of what it was.
Have you got the fountain pens I asked for the other day?
This only leaves the 3 centering diphthongs of mid-20th century RP. These begin with the qualities suggested by the first symbol in each case. In the case of the square diphthong, Gimson later switched to the ordinary letter E, but this was for simplicity and not to indicate a pronunciation change. As for the end point of these diphthongs, Gimson tells us that at least in final position it was the open variant of schwa, the one more like strut. Ur.
There is some water here. Here.
A cure for baldness. Cure.
He sniffed the air. Air. Here.
Cure.
Air.
So to complete our demo sentence, if young men lack posh books and learn speech far too broad, those sounds by boys make clear they're poor. If young men lack posh books and learn speech far too broad, those sounds by boys make clear they're poor. Now, I think many of you, especially native speakers from Britain, will immediately recognise that as a very specific kind of accent, exactly in accordance with Gimson's intentions, to accurately depict the speech of the more exclusively educated classes and the official voices of the BBC circa 1960. Gimson was a fine phonetician, and crucially he was happy to replace established symbols for the sake of accuracy and to reflect actual changes in speech that had taken place. So anyone today who wants to cling to Gimson's symbols is showing contempt for his methodology. My own book, English After RP, is an attempt not to rubbish Gimson, but to emulate him. If anyone was to use these actual RP vowels today, they wouldn't stand much chance of getting a job as a BBC newsreader. The public would find it hard to accept serious news in an accent like that. And an actor using that kind of accent wouldn't get much work except in shows like The Crown or Jeeves and Wooster. Nowadays, that accent's even too posh and old-fashioned for a typical British villain in Hollywood. The truth is that the accent these symbols were intended to depict dropped drastically out of fashion practically the moment Gimson published them. So how and why did this happen, and so rapidly? It's a fascinating story that I'll go into in my next video.
Goodbye.